My phone started buzzing at exactly 4:12 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. The first call came from my father, then my mother, then my sister, then three numbers I didn't recognize at all. By the time I looked down, I had 11 missed calls and a string of text messages stacking on top of each other like dominoes. Where are you? The caterer is asking about the deposit. Grant says the rental company won't release the tables. Mom is crying. I stared at the screen for a long moment before turning the phone face down on my desk. Huh. Outside my office window at Travis Air Force Base, the sky had gone the color of wet concrete, the way it does over the Sacramento Valley in late November. A C-17 was taxiing back toward the flight line, engines still ticking with heat, having just delivered 11 military families home from overseas duty stations in time for the holiday. I'd stood on that tarmac 2 hours earlier and watched a staff sergeant fall to his knees on the pavement because his 6-year-old daughter didn't recognize him at first, and then did. That was a real homecoming. What was waiting for me on the other end of that phone was something else entirely. My name is Renee Ashford, and I'm a brigadier general in the United States Air Force. I command a mobility wing, which means on any given day I'm responsible for the airplanes, the aircrews, and the maintainers who move people and cargo across the globe, sometimes into places most Americans will never hear about on the news. I've briefed 4-star generals without my hand shaking. I've made command decisions in the middle of the night that affected hundreds of lives. But for 22 years, I could not say one simple sentence to my own family. No. I grew up outside Sacramento in a small house on a street where everyone knew everyone else's business. Thanksgiving was my mother's holiday the way Christmas belongs to some families. She planned it for weeks, clipped recipes out of magazines, ironed the tablecloth twice. My father liked to stand at the head of the table and carve the turkey like it was a ceremony he'd invented himself. Back then, the holiday meant noise and butter and my little brother running through the kitchen with his fingers in the mashed potatoes before anyone could stop him. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Not all at once. Slowly, the way a hairline crack spreads across a windshield, until one day the whole thing gives. The first Thanksgiving after I commissioned through ROTC, my mother called and said my father had had a rough year at the shop. Just this once. Could I help with the turkey and the extra folding chairs? Since I was an officer now, and officers made real money, I sent $200. She thanked me like I'd saved the holiday itself. The next year, it wasn't just the turkey. It was the tablecloth rental, the good wine, new coats for my brother's kids because it was getting cold. My brother Grant had lost another job. My sister Paige was newly divorced with a baby on her hip. "You're doing so well," Mom said. "You make more than any of us put together." I believed that helping family was simply what a good daughter did. So I paid. Years passed. Promotions came. Deployments came. Every November, the phone would ring before the leaves had even finished turning, and the first question was never "How are you?" or "Where has the Air Force sent you this year?" It was always some version of the same sentence. "How much are you putting toward Thanksgiving this year?" Sometimes they didn't even ask anymore. They simply informed me. "We found a really nice hall to rent. The caterer needs a deposit by Friday. Grant's boys each want the new gaming systems. We're doing prime rib this year instead of turkey. It's more special." Then they'd wait, because everyone already knew who would write the check. Me. Ironically, I rarely enjoy the holidays I financed. The Air Force has never once respected a calendar. Some years, I flew in exhausted from a deployment rotation and left before the pie was cut because my flight back to Travis couldn't wait for dessert. Twice, I spent Thanksgiving on a cargo plane somewhere over the Atlantic, eating a foil-wrapped meal with a loadmaster half my age. Still, the money always arrived before the holiday, even when I couldn't. My promotion to general changed how strangers treated me. Airports upgraded my seat without me asking. Young officers wrote to me for career advice. But inside my parents' house, I was still just Renee, the reliable one, the one you could count on, the walking checkbook with wings on her chest. Grant loved introducing me to his friends. "My sister's a general," he'd say, grinning. Then he'd quietly ask if I could cover an overdue truck payment before anyone else in the room noticed. Paige hugged me every year and whispered, "I hate asking." Then she'd ask anyway. My mother always said the exact same sentence, like a line she'd memorized. "We really do appreciate everything, honey." Looking back, I understand now that the appreciation never outlasted the sentence, because another request always followed close behind it. 6 months before that Thanksgiving, I was in Washington for a Mobility Command conference. It had been a long day of briefings and budget arguments, and I stepped out into the hotel hallway to call home, mostly out of habit. No one answered. As I turned to walk back toward the ballroom, I heard my mother's voice around the corner. She was on speakerphone with Paige. Neither of them knew I was standing there. My mother laughed, low and easy. As long as Renee still feels guilty about missing everything, she'll keep paying for it. Paige laughed too. Don't thank her too much though. Why? Because she likes feeling needed. Then my father's voice, calm, almost bored. She's a lot easier to manage than Grant is. The three of them laughed together, that warm, familiar family laugh I'd grown up inside of. I stood frozen in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. Long enough for every Thanksgiving, every canceled leave request, every expensive gift mailed instead of delivered in person, to line up in my head like aircraft on a runway waiting for clearance. Here is the part I want to be honest about, because I've thought about it a great deal since. I didn't fall apart in that hallway. I didn't cry. 26 years of military discipline doesn't just switch off because your chest feels like it's caving in. What I did instead was something closer to what I'd do if an aircraft reported an in-flight anomaly. I filed it away calmly, and I started thinking about what to do with the information, rather than what to feel about it. If I walked in there right now and confronted them, I remember thinking, they'll apologize, everyone will cry, and by next November, we'll be exactly here again. I've seen that pattern before. I needed something more than an argument. I needed the truth to hold its own weight, so I went back into the ballroom. I took my seat. I asked a sharp question during the next panel about fuel logistics. No one in that room had the faintest idea that something inside me had just quietly, permanently changed. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Grant or Paige. But 2 weeks later, over coffee at the Travis Officers Club, I told my closest friend on base, Major Priya Nathan, who happened to be a JAG officer. I'm not trying to sue my own mother, I told her, half laughing at how absurd the sentence sounded out loud. I just want to understand what I'm actually allowed to do, legally, if I stop. Priya set down her coffee and looked at me the way she looks at case files, carefully, like she was already 3 steps ahead. You're allowed to stop supporting adults who are capable of supporting themselves, Renee. That's not a legal question. That's a permission question. And it sounds like you've never given yourself permission. I didn't have an answer for that. I just nodded and changed the subject, the way I always did. Over the following months, I made one quiet decision. I wasn't going to argue about it. I wasn't going to announce it. I simply stopped arranging Thanksgiving. I didn't call a caterer. I didn't reserve the hall. I didn't wire a single dollar. If anyone had asked me directly, I would have told them the truth. But no one asked, because everyone assumed, the way they always had, that it was already handled. Now, on Thanksgiving afternoon, I sat alone in my office at Travis while my phone lit up again and again on the desk. Outside, the flight line crews were finishing up the evening's mission brief. A young airman knocked softly on my door. "Ma'am, Chow Hall's got the meal going. Folks were hoping you'd stop by." "I'll be there shortly, Airman." He smiled. "Happy Thanksgiving, General. Happy Thanksgiving, General. Happy Thanksgiving." After he left, the phone rang again. My father this time. I answered. "The caterer just called Grant," he said without any hello at all. "Said nobody paid the deposit. Said the whole booking's canceled." I closed my eyes for a second. "That's because I never hired them." Silence. Then a sharp breath on the other end. "What do you mean you never hired them?" "I mean exactly what I said, Dad. I never called them. I never booked the hall. I never sent a deposit. But you always. I know. You always take care of. I know, Dad." He stopped talking entirely. In 22 years, there had never been a Thanksgiving without a script, and now the script simply didn't exist. I could hear voices behind him, my mother asking what was wrong, one of Grant's boys asking if dinner was ready yet, a door opening and closing. Finally, my father's voice dropped, quieter now, less angry than confused. "So, what are we supposed to do?" I looked out toward the flight line where the last purple light of the day was draining out of the sky over the hangars. "I guess you'll figure it out the way everybody else does, Dad." Then I hung up. I want to say I felt triumphant. I didn't. People imagine that setting a boundary feels like winning. It doesn't, not at first. Especially not when the people you're setting it against are the same people who used to tuck you into bed. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was simply, finally, exhausted in a way that had nothing left to give. The chow hall had been decorated by a handful of volunteers, paper turkeys taped to the windows, a banner that read "Home Away from Home" in a maintenance technician's careful block letters. Elementary school in Fairfield had sent a stack of handmade cards for anyone spending the holiday on base. One read in a child's crooked pencil, "Thank you for keeping us safe, even on Thanksgiving. I hope you get pie." It made me smile, despite everything. "Ma'am," Master Sergeant Elena Cruz said, waving me toward an open seat, "we saved you a spot." I picked up a tray and sat down among airmen half my age, sailors, one lonely-looking soldier who'd hitched a ride from Fort Cronkite for the meal. No one asked about my rank. No one asked about my family. For an hour, I was simply another person eating turkey a long way from home, and that, strangely, felt like peace. As I sat there, I found myself thinking backward, the way you do when the present finally forces you to make sense of the past. People assume families become dysfunctional overnight. In my experience, it happens an inch at a time. Growing up, Grant, 3 years younger than me, could do almost no wrong. If he forgot to mow the lawn, my father finished it without a word. If he failed a class, the teacher had it out for him. If he wrecked the car, it was just bad luck, nothing more. Paige, the baby of the family, cried easily and was protected from almost everything as a result. If Paige didn't want to do the dishes, I did them. If Grant forgot a birthday, I bought the gift and let him sign the card. My parents called me the reliable one. As a girl, I thought that was the nicest thing anyone could call me. As an adult, I understood it meant I had quietly agreed to carry everyone else's responsibilities without ever being asked whether I wanted to. The Air Force became my way out. Not because I hated my family, because I needed, desperately, to find out who I was when I wasn't solving someone else's problem. ROTC wasn't easy. There were mornings during field training when my legs hurt so badly I could barely stand at attention. Nights I genuinely wondered if I belonged there at all. But every obstacle I cleared gave me something my childhood hadn't, the plain, uncomplicated knowledge that I had earned what I had. No one at that training site cared whether I was the oldest daughter of anybody. Everyone carried their own weight or they didn't make it through. That lesson followed me through my entire career. It just never made it back home. My career moved faster than I ever expected. Squadron command, staff college, a joint assignment at the Pentagon, and eventually my first star. Reporters occasionally wanted a quote. Young female officers wrote me letters saying they hoped to follow a path like mine someday. I answered everyone I could. And yet every November, the conversation at home never changed. "Renee, the dishwasher's leaking again. Renee, Grant's truck note is behind. Renee, Paige's lawyer needs another retainer." Sometimes I genuinely wanted to help. Other times I knew, quietly, that they could have managed without me. But guilt has a way of dressing itself up as responsibility, especially when it's your own parents doing the dressing. A few months before that Thanksgiving, my financial advisor, Daniel Okafor, asked for our annual review. He laid several printouts across the conference table in his office. "General Ashford," he said carefully, "there's something I think you should actually look at rather than just sign off on." He slid a spreadsheet toward me. It listed every transfer I'd made to family members over the previous 22 years. Holiday expenses, emergency loans, a truck down payment, medical bills, a kitchen remodel, tuition for 2 nephews, Paige's divorce attorney, Grant's failed landscaping business, and, of course, Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving. The total sat at the bottom of the page, $387,400. I stared at it for a long moment. "I thought it would be higher," I finally said, trying for a joke. Daniel didn't laugh. "How much of it has been repaid?" he asked instead, quietly. I already knew the answer. Not a dollar. He folded his hands on the table. "I don't usually comment on a client's personal life, General, but this stopped looking like generosity a long time ago. It's not a gift anymore. It's a dependency, and you're the one funding it." Dependency, not love, not gratitude. Dependency. That word sat in my chest for weeks afterward. "There's something else," Daniel added, tapping a highlighted line near the bottom. 3 of these transfers, taken together in a single year, went over the federal gift tax exclusion. You filed the Form 709 correctly at the time, so you're clean with the IRS. I just want you aware, legally, you've done everything right. The problem was never the paperwork. Back at my parents' house, I learned later, things had unraveled quickly. The hall reservation had been automatically released because no deposit ever came through. The caterer gave the booking away by early afternoon. Grant insisted someone order takeout, but every restaurant within 20 miles had a 2-hour wait on Thanksgiving Day. Paige cried because she promised her daughter a real holiday this year. My father kept insisting there had to be some kind of mistake with the bank. My mother was certain I'd simply forgotten. Neither one was true. Eventually, everyone drove back to my parents' house. Instead of prime rib and a decorated table, they found a freezer with 2 boxes of frozen waffles and not much else. The grandchildren ate cereal for Thanksgiving dinner while the adults argued in the kitchen. Around 8 that evening, my phone buzzed with something different. Not another angry call, but a single text message from my 17-year-old niece Zoe. She almost never texted me directly. The message held one photograph, a card table with mismatched chairs, paper plates, a half-empty bag of store-brand chips, and several relatives wearing the particular expression of people whose holiday had quietly collapsed underneath them. Under the photo, she'd written, "Grandma keeps telling everyone this is your fault." A second message came before I could answer. "I don't think it is, though." Then a third. "Is there something nobody's telling me?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Zoe wasn't asking for money. She wasn't accusing me of anything. She genuinely wanted to understand. For the first time all day, someone in my family had asked me a question instead of handing me a bill. I took a slow breath and I began typing the truth. "No, sweetheart. I decided this year not to plan or pay for Thanksgiving." She replied almost instantly, "Why?" "Because I finally realized people expected it from me instead of ever being grateful for it." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, 5 words came through. "I never knew you paid." Neither, I thought, did almost anyone else. The morning after Thanksgiving, base life resumed its strange, steady rhythm. Aircraft still needed inspecting. Security forces still stood post. The mission never pauses for a holiday hangover, ours or anyone else's. I walked the flight line before sunrise the way I try to every morning, shaking hands with airmen who'd spent the holiday away from everyone they loved. A young loadmaster from Ohio grinned when he saw me. "Morning, ma'am. My mom mailed me a whole pie, priority shipping and everything." "That's dedication," I said. He laughed. "She said if the Air Force wasn't going to fly me home, she'd fly the pie to me instead." Military humor rarely announces itself loudly. It's the quiet ability to laugh at disappointment instead of letting it win. I've always admired that about the people I serve with. Just before noon, my phone rang again. Not family this time, but my cousin Mitchell, whom I hadn't spoken to in the better part of a year. "Hey, Renee." An awkward pause. "Hope I'm not bothering you." "You're not, Mitchell. What's going on?" "My mom's confused about what happened yesterday. Thanksgiving kind of fell apart apparently. She heard you decided not to come." "That's true." Another pause, and then he asked the question no one else in the family had bothered to ask. "Can I ask something? Who usually pays for all that stuff? The hall, the food, all of it?" I looked down at the coffee going cold in my hand. "You really don't know?" "No. I always figured Uncle Walter covered it." Silence. A long one. "Wait," Mitchell finally said. "The whole thing? Every year?" "The hall, the catering, the gifts for Mom and Dad, Grant's boys' presents, all of it." My God, I thought he paid for everything. So did everyone else. By late afternoon, something unusual had started happening. The angry calls had nearly stopped. Instead, people were asking questions, and questions, I was learning, have a way of quietly dismantling a lie that's been standing for 20 years. I pieced together the rest of it later. Mitchell mentioned our conversation to his mother, my Aunt Roberta, who assumed at first that he must have misunderstood. She called another cousin to check. That cousin called an uncle. Within a few hours, relatives across 3 states were comparing notes, and little details that had never quite made sense before suddenly clicked into place. Every year I arrived carrying wrapped gifts for everyone. Every year my father mysteriously handled the reservations. Every year someone thanked my parents for being such generous hosts, and no one had ever once asked who had actually written the checks. People simply believed the story that was easiest to believe. Around 4 that afternoon, my phone rang. "Aunt Roberta." "Renee, no small talk at all. I need you to answer one question, honestly." "Okay. Have you really been paying for Thanksgiving all these years?" "All of it?" "Almost all of it." "Yes." A long silence, and then something in her voice cracked. "Oh, sweetheart. Not general, not the successful one, just sweetheart." She sounded heartbroken. "I had no idea," she said. Your father always talked like it was his gift to the family. I know. Why didn't you ever say something? Because I thought that's what daughters were supposed to do, I said quietly. No, she answered, gentle but firm. That's what parents are supposed to protect their daughters from. By early evening, the family group chat, normally full of recipes and football scores and pictures of grandchildren, had turned into something else entirely. One cousin asked who'd actually paid for the haul. No one answered right away. Another wrote, I honestly thought Uncle Walter did. Paige finally responded, Renee helped sometimes. Mitchell replied almost immediately. She told me she paid for almost everything. Then a cousin from Reno chimed in. Wait, seriously? Grant jumped into the thread. This isn't anyone's business but ours, Mitchell answered without hesitation. It kind of is, if everyone's blaming Renee for it. The thread exploded after that. Questions, confusion, 20 years of comfortable assumptions falling apart in real time. I hadn't said a single word in the chat. I didn't need to. The truth was doing something. Money never could. That evening, instead of sitting alone, I volunteered to help serve the late dinner in the enlisted dining hall. I traded my jacket for a serving apron. A young airman laughed when he saw me behind the steam table. Never thought I'd see a one-star scooping mashed potatoes, ma'am. First time for everything, airman. Word spread fast. The line got friendlier, looser. People joked about portion control and asked where I'd learned to serve like that. Strategic resource allocation, I told them, and got a room full of laughter for it. For an hour, rank simply disappeared. There were no generals, no colonels, no airmen basic. Just people sharing a holiday meal a long way from home. Afterward, I carried my own tray to an empty table. A young airman named Cody, nervous, sat down across from me with his tray. Mind if I sit here, ma'am? Please. My family's back in Oregon, he said after a moment. Can I ask you something kind of personal? You can ask. He looked down at his coffee. Do you have family, ma'am? I looked around the room. Airmen laughing over pie, someone video calling home on a cracked phone screen, a chief helping a brand new recruit open a care package from his mother. Tonight, I said quietly. I do. He smiled. That's a pretty good answer. I think so too. Around 9 that night, just as I was leaving the dining hall, my phone rang once more. The caller ID stopped me in the hallway. My Uncle Louis, my father's older brother. We'd always gotten along, but he almost never called me directly. Merry Thanksgiving, Uncle Louis. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Took me too long to make this call. It's all right. Huh. No, it's really not. What do you mean? I owe you an apology, Renee, for believing a story that wasn't true. And there's something about your mother and father. Something they never wanted you to know. I leaned against the cold cinder block wall of the hallway. Somehow, I already understood that this conversation was going to change everything I thought I knew about my own family. Tell me, I said. Louis let out a long breath. I've wrestled with this for years. I should have told you a long time ago. Louis had always been different from my father. Where my father believed family troubles stayed locked inside the family, Louis believed silence usually just protected the wrong people. I remember the day your ROTC scholarship letter came, he began. You were so excited you couldn't sit still at Thanksgiving dinner that year. I remember that too, I said, smiling despite everything. I must have read that letter 50 times, closer to 100, I think. We both laughed softly, and then his voice turned serious again. Your mother cried after everyone left that night. I frowned. Cried because she was proud? No, she cried because she said she was losing you. Losing me. Losing me? Those were her exact words. She said once you built a whole life of your own out there, you'd stop needing them. I closed my eyes. I never stopped needing them, Uncle Louis. I know that. Your parents never quite saw it that way, though. Louis explained that after I commissioned, relatives constantly praised my discipline, my grades, my promotions. At first, my parents beamed with pride. But slowly, something shifted. The more successful you got, Louis said, the more your father started talking like your accomplishments belonged partly to him. She got her discipline from me, he'd say. None of this happens if I hadn't pushed her so hard growing up. I could almost hear my father saying it. It sounded exactly like him. That part I figured was just Dad being Dad, I said. It would have stayed that way, Louis said, except then came the money. According to my uncle, the first time my parents accepted help from me, they were embarrassed by it. My father had lost overtime hours at the shop. My mother was worried about the property tax bill. I quietly wired enough to get them through the winter. Louis remembered my father thanking him almost sheepishly for raising such a generous daughter. He appreciated it, at first, Louis said. The second time was easier. The third easier than that. Eventually, asking turned into expecting, and nobody in that house seemed to notice the difference. That single sentence explained 22 years of my life better than anything anyone had ever said to me before. There's something else, Louis continued. They started competing. Competing with who? Other relatives. Every year they wanted people to believe they were hosting the biggest, nicest Thanksgiving in the whole family. The hall, the catering, the decorations, all of it. I remembered neighbors and cousins complimenting my parents every November. Your family always does it right. Your father sure knows how to host a holiday. I had smiled through every one of those compliments and never once said actually I paid for it. They let people believe it was their own generosity, Louis said quietly, not directly lying, but they certainly never bothered correcting anyone. He hesitated. This next part isn't easy to say. Go ahead. There were times relatives offered to help, offered to bring food, split the hall rental, chip in for the kids' gifts. Your parents always turned them down, said everything was already handled because of you. My grip tightened around the phone. All those years, people might have actually helped. Not everyone, but enough to make a real difference, Louis said. Instead, your parents protected an image one daughter was quietly funding the whole time. The conversation stayed with me long after we hung up. The next morning, I attended a memorial service on base honoring airmen lost during the past year. Holiday or not, the Air Force never forgets. A chaplain offered a prayer. Names were read aloud, a bell sounding after each one. Families sat in the front rows, some holding folded flags, some holding photographs. Standing there in my dress uniform, I thought about sacrifice. In the military, sacrifice has a purpose. You give something of yourself so someone else can be protected, so others can live safely. It's voluntary. It's honorable. What I'd been doing at home for 2 decades wasn't sacrifice anymore. It had quietly become obligation. There's a difference. One comes from love, the other comes from expectation. I wished, standing there, that I had learned the difference sooner. When the service ended, a retired Chief Master Sergeant, who had served under me years earlier, approached and shook my hand. General Ashford, heard you stayed on base this Thanksgiving. I did. Best place to be, sometimes. He studied my face for a moment. You know what 30 years in this uniform taught me? The people who take advantage of kindness always call it duty. His words caught me completely off guard. You've been talking to my therapist. No, he said, smiling. I've just lived long enough. Meanwhile, things kept shifting back home, not because I demanded anything, but because the truth had gotten loose and there was no putting it back. Aunt Roberta told me later that relatives who defended my parents for years suddenly started asking uncomfortable questions. If Renee paid all this time, why did nobody ever thank her properly? Why wasn't there a backup plan? If the whole holiday depended on one person, was it really a family celebration at all? Grant hated those conversations. According to Mitchell, he stormed out of a family gathering after accusing everyone of ganging up on our parents. Paige cried again, but this time no one rushed to comfort her the way they used to. Instead, Aunt Roberta asked gently but plainly, Paige, when's the last time you paid for a single Thanksgiving dinner yourself? Paige couldn't answer, neither could Grant. 3 days after the holiday, I was back at my desk after a string of meetings when my assistant handed me a small stack of mail, a few official letters, some holiday cards, and one handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple card, no signature. One sentence. Thank you for reminding us that generosity should never be mistaken for obligation. I read it twice. I never found out who sent it. Maybe one of my airmen. Maybe someone in my family. Maybe a stranger who'd heard the story secondhand. It didn't matter. The word stayed with me. That evening, as the light drained out over the flight line, my phone buzzed once more. Not a flood of angry calls this time. One voicemail from my mother. I almost deleted it without listening. Instead, I pressed play. For several seconds, there was only quiet breathing. Then her voice, not angry, not defensive, just tired. Renee. A pause, as if she were searching for words she'd forgotten how to use. I've been thinking. Another pause. Then, almost a whisper. Maybe we went too far. The message ended there. No excuses, no requests, no mention of money. 6 words carrying the weight of 22 years. For the first time since Thanksgiving Day, I believed reconciliation might actually be possible. But I also understood something else clearly. If we were going to rebuild this family, it couldn't be built on guilt ever again. I didn't call her back that night, not the next morning either. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to know whether those 6 words had come from genuine reflection or simply from the discomfort of finally being seen. For most of my life, I had confused quick forgiveness with healthy forgiveness. They are not the same thing. Healthy forgiveness requires honesty. Quick forgiveness usually just demands silence, and I had already given that family more than enough silence to last several lifetimes. The following week, something else happened that changed the shape of everything. I was reviewing base correspondence on a Tuesday morning when Priya Nathan called, her voice carrying the particular flatness she used for things that were about to become complicated. "Renee, I need you to sit down for this one." I'm sitting. "Do you know anything about a nonprofit called Heroes Home Fund?" I didn't. "No? Why?" "It's a fundraising page, mostly on social media. Claims to support disabled veterans transitioning out of service. Started about 18 months ago. It's raised a little over $40,000 from small donors, a lot of them military families, a lot of them people who trusted the name attached to it." "What name?" Priya's voice softened, the way it did right before she delivered bad news in a courtroom. "Yours, Renee. Your rank, your service photo, a quote attributed to you that you never said. The organizer listed is your brother." I sat very still for a long moment. Grant. Grant. Where did the money go? That's the question the California Attorney General's Charity Registry is going to want answered too, because as far as I can tell, this fund was never registered as a charity at all. No filings. No disbursements to any veteran organization I can find. "Renee, I need to ask you directly. Did you authorize the use of your name or your likeness for this?" "No," I said. "Never." Then we have a real problem, not a family problem, a legal one. I sat with that for a long moment, staring at the framed photo on my desk of my first flight crew, 20 years younger and grinning like idiots on a runway in Germany. This wasn't about a missed Thanksgiving anymore. Somewhere along the way, my family's dependency on me had curdled into something that put real donors, real strangers who trusted a uniform and a name, at risk of having been quietly defrauded. I called Grant that afternoon. I wanted to give him the chance to explain himself before anything became official, the way I would have wanted someone to give me that chance. "Grant, I need you to tell me about Heroes Home Fund." Silence on the line, just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. "It's not what it sounds like, Ren." "Then tell me what it actually is." I was going to pay it back. The truck note was behind, and then Thanksgiving happened, and everyone was looking at me like I was supposed to have an answer for once, and I panicked. "You used my name, Grant, my rank. People donated because they trusted me. I was going to fix it." "When?" He didn't answer. "Ugh, I need you to shut the page down. Tonight. And I need you to talk to a lawyer, because this isn't a family conversation anymore. This is fraud. You're going to report your own brother? I'm going to protect the people who trusted a uniform they thought was mine. That's not the same thing as choosing sides against you, Grant, even though I understand why it feels that way." He hung up on me. The page didn't come down that night. The next morning, on Priya's advice, I filed a report with the Air Force Inspector General's office regarding the unauthorized use of my rank and likeness, and Priya separately notified the California Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts about an unregistered fundraising operation. I want to be clear about something because I've turned it over in my mind many times since. I did not do this out of anger. I did it because $40,000 had come from ordinary people, some of them military families themselves, who believed they were supporting veterans. And instead, that money appeared to have gone toward a truck payment and a holiday no one had actually planned properly in the first place. Within 2 weeks, the investigation moved with the particular speed that only comes when a federal uniform is involved. The fundraising page was taken down by the platform itself, pending review. Grant was contacted by an investigator from the Attorney General's office, and on the advice of counsel, he could not really afford, agreed to a settlement, full repayment of every traceable donation, most of it going instead to a legitimate registered veterans transition charity in Sacramento, along with a formal admission that no charity registration had ever existed. He avoided criminal charges in the end, largely because he cooperated quickly and because the amount, while serious, fell under the threshold where prosecutors in an overloaded office chose a civil resolution instead. The Inspector General's office issued a formal notice regarding the unauthorized use of my rank and image, which meant, among other things, that it now existed permanently in a file somewhere with my brother's name attached to it. Grant did not speak to me for 6 weeks. It was Uncle Louie, oddly enough, who called again during that stretch of silence, this time not to unload another old secret, but simply to check on me. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like anything, honestly. That's usually how the right thing feels, in my experience." 3 days before Christmas, my father called. His voice sounded older than I remembered, not angrier, just tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Your mother hasn't been sleeping," he said. I waited. "She keeps going over everything in her head." I waited again. Finally, he asked, "Would you come home, just for an afternoon?" "I don't know, Dad." "I understand." Another long pause, then something I never expected. "I don't want to talk about money, Renee. I just want to talk." That was a first in 22 years. I looked out my office window toward the flight line. Fog was rolling low across the runway, the way it does most mornings in the valley in December. Ground crews kept working anyway because aircraft don't wait for families to sort themselves out, and neither does life. "I'll come Saturday," I said. "Thank you. And Dad, if anyone in that house expects an apology from me for Thanksgiving, they're not getting one. I mean that." "I know," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. "I know." Saturday morning, I drove to Sacramento alone. The trunk of my car held one overnight bag and nothing else. No envelope of cash, no expensive gifts bought to smooth over hard feelings, no carefully wrapped guilt. It felt strange, driving that road without a mental checklist running underneath everything. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it always had. The same porch light, the same crooked mailbox my father had never quite gotten around to fixing. He opened the front door before I'd even reached it. For a second, we just looked at each other. He seemed smaller than I remembered, not physically, but somewhere underneath. "Hi, Renee." He caught himself. "Renee." Hi caught himself. "Renee. Sorry." "Hi, Dad." He stepped aside. "Come in." My mother was waiting in the living room, her eyes red-rimmed. She stood slowly, and for a moment I thought she might hug me. Instead, she said quietly, "Thank you for coming." I almost didn't. I know. Nobody raised their voice. The silence itself felt more honest than anything that had been said in that house in years. Paige arrived 20 minutes later. Grant came 10 minutes after that, still not fully speaking to me, taking his coat off slowly like he was buying himself time to decide whether he even wanted to be in the room. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "I think we all owe Renee a chance to talk without anybody interrupting her." That sentence alone told me something had genuinely shifted. For once, I wasn't cut off before I'd even started. I opened the folder I'd brought with me. My father looked confused. My mother frowned. Grant shifted in his chair, arms crossed. "What is all this?" my father asked. "Our family's history," I said. "The real version." I handed each of them a printed page. Bank transfers, canceled checks, receipts, organized by year. Every Thanksgiving, every emergency, every loan. I watched their faces change as they moved down the list. 2002, the kitchen remodel. 2005, Grant's truck repair. 2008, Paige's hospital bill after her first pregnancy. 2011, Dad's roof. 2014, Grant's landscaping business. 2017, Paige's divorce attorney. 2022, the last Thanksgiving I ever paid for. No commentary, no accusations, just facts. The room stayed silent except for the sound of paper turning. Finally, my mother whispered, "I never realized." I looked at her gently. "Yes, you did." She lowered her eyes. "I just never wanted to add it up." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't argue, because she couldn't. Grant finally spoke, his voice tight. "I always figured you had plenty to spare." "I did," I said. "So that made it okay?" He looked away. "No. It just made it easier not to think about." I nodded. "Exactly." Paige folded her hands quietly. "I told myself I'd pay you back someday. I know. I never did. I know. I never did. I know." She started crying then, real crying, not the performance crying I'd grown so used to over the years. "I'm sorry." For the first time that whole afternoon, I believed someone actually meant it. Not because she'd been caught, because she'd finally understood. My father removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I failed you, Renee. The sentence hung there in the room. I taught all of you that family takes care of family, he said. But I forgot something. Parents are supposed to take care of their children too. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my daughter and started seeing you as the person who could fix everything for the rest of us. His voice broke. That wasn't fair to you. It was never fair to you. I felt my own eyes filling. I wanted to help, Dad. I know you did. But I shouldn't have let you carry it alone for so long. My mother reached for my hand carefully, as though she wasn't sure she still had permission to. I used to brag about you constantly, to anyone who'd listen. I know. But somewhere along the way, she said, wiping her eyes, I got more excited about what you could do for us than about who you actually were. Those words hurt, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I took a slow breath. I need all of you to hear something clearly. I'm not angry because I spent the money. I'm angry because none of you ever once asked what those years actually cost me. No one spoke. I missed birthdays. I canceled leave. I postponed relationships because I thought Thanksgiving depended on me showing up with a checkbook. Do you know how many holidays I spent exhausted because I'd flown in straight off a rotation just to make sure the caterer got paid on time? They shook their heads. No, I said, because nobody ever asked. The room went painfully quiet. Grant finally spoke, his voice lower now, some of the defensiveness drained out of it. I owe you more than an apology, Ren. What I did. The fund. That wasn't about Thanksgiving anymore. That was me making it worse. Yes, I said, it was. I'm still paying the settlement off. I'll be paying it off for a while. I know. I'm not asking you to make that go away. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. That part's not mine to fix anymore, Grant. It's yours. He nodded, slowly, and for the first time in weeks, he actually looked at me instead of past me. I reached into the folder one last time, not another receipt, a single sheet of paper, my boundaries, written out in plain language. My father looked nervous. My mother looked ashamed. Grant looked for once, genuinely humbled instead of cornered. Paige quietly nodded before I'd even started reading. I will never again be responsible for funding family holidays, I read. No one objected. If someone wants an expensive celebration, they can pay for it themselves. If there's a genuine emergency, I'll decide whether I'm able to help, not because I'm expected to, but because I choose to. And Thanksgiving, from now on, I looked up at each of them, belongs to everyone in this room, not just to me. My father slowly folded the paper and handed it back to me. I think those are fair. Grant surprised me by speaking next. I'll handle the turkey next year, properly this time. Paige looked over. I'll do the decorations, and I'll actually pay for them. My mother wiped her face. I'll cook the sides like I used to before all this started. My father managed a small, tired smile. I'll buy the wine. It wasn't really about the wine or the turkey or the sides. It was about shared responsibility, something none of us had ever truly practiced before. As the afternoon wound down, we stood together near the front door, no one quite sure how to end the conversation. Finally, my father asked the question he'd clearly been carrying all day. Do you think, he said, swallowing hard, you'll ever want to spend a holiday here again? I looked around the house, the same walls, the same old family photographs on the mantle, the same family, and yet somehow everything about it felt different now. I don't know, I said honestly. Their faces fell, just slightly. But if I do, I continued, looking at each of them in turn, it'll be because you want me here. Not because you need my signature on a check. No one had an answer for that. They didn't need one. Sometimes the truth says enough on its own. The 11 months that followed passed the way time always does in the Air Force, measured not in weeks but in rotations, inspections, promotion boards, change of command ceremonies. Before I fully registered it, Christmas had come and gone, and Thanksgiving was approaching once more. To my surprise, my phone stayed quiet in the weeks leading up to it. No one asked about a budget. No one sent links to an expensive rental hall. Instead, 2 weeks before the holiday, my mother called. Renee. Hi, honey. Hi, Mom. We're putting together the grocery list for Thanksgiving. I wanted to check. Do you still not eat shellfish? I can never remember. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My food preferences, Mom. She laughed softly. Well, you're actually eating dinner with us this year. Figured I should ask. Huh, still no shellfish. Good. I'm making your grandmother's cornbread stuffing. It wasn't a long call, maybe 5 minutes. Not once did money come up. When we hung up, I realized something quietly remarkable. For the first time in over 2 decades, my mother had planned a holiday around my presence instead of my wallet. Thanksgiving morning found me driving toward Sacramento once more. The trunk of my car looked almost empty. One overnight bag, a small tin of cookies the maintenance squadron had insisted I bring along, 3 modest gifts, nothing extravagant, nothing bought to ease anybody's guilt. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something immediately different. No rental van blocking the street, no overflowing parking, no elaborate decorations covering every inch of the yard. Just my parents' modest house with warm light glowing through the windows, looking, for once, exactly like what it was, an ordinary family home on an ordinary holiday. My father opened the door before I could knock. There she is. He hugged me. Not the quick, distracted hug he used to give while mentally checking whether the hall deposit had cleared, but a real one. "I've missed you," he said. "I've missed you too, Dad." Those words felt different this time because I actually believed him. Inside, the house smelled like my childhood. Roasted turkey, warm bread, cinnamon. Paige was in the living room hanging paper turkeys with her daughter. Homemade ones, cut from construction paper. Nothing store-bought. One of them had my name written across it in careful teenage handwriting. Another said, simply, "Welcome home, Aunt Wren." Grant walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron, of all things. I stopped in the doorway, genuinely surprised. "You're cooking?" "Don't sound so shocked." He shrugged, a little sheepish. "Watched about 40 videos online this week. The stuffing's actually pretty good. If it isn't, well, there's butter for that." We both laughed, easy and unguarded, the way we hadn't laughed together in years. My mother carried the turkey to the table herself. My father followed with the vegetables. Zoe, my niece, set out the rolls she baked with Paige that morning. Grant poured the iced tea. No one directed traffic. No one acted like a single person was responsible for the whole production. Everyone simply helped, quietly, without being asked. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that happen in this house. My father raised his glass before we sat down. "I want to say something, if that's all right." The room went quiet. He looked directly at me. For a long time, I confused generosity with obligation. I told myself I was proud of my daughter. I was, but I didn't treat her like someone I was proud of. I treated her like someone I could depend on for everything, and I forgot she deserved to be able to depend on us too. His voice trembled slightly. "I'm sorry, Renee." No one looked away. No one tried to change the subject or move things along too quickly. Sometimes the most meaningful apologies are the ones spoken out loud in front of the very people who witnessed the hurt in the first place. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, that was enough." Dinner wasn't perfect. The gravy came out a little lumpy. Grant admitted he'd nearly burned the rolls before Paige rescued them. One of the younger cousins knocked over a full glass of cranberry juice halfway through the meal, and everyone laughed while cleaning it up together instead of panicking or assigning blame. It wasn't an expensive holiday. It was, for the first time in longer than I could remember, a real one. After dessert, Zoe sat beside me on the couch. "I'm glad you came," she said. "So am I." She smiled. "I've been saving money from my job at the movie theater. I'm going to help pay for part of Christmas this year." "You don't have to do that, Zoe." "I know," she said, grinning. "I want to. Want to, not have to." That was the difference. That was the exact lesson it had taken me 22 years and one very expensive spreadsheet to finally learn. Grant found me alone in the kitchen later, drying dishes while everyone else settled in front of the television. "Hey," he said, hovering in the doorway. I never really said it properly earlier. "You don't have to say it again." "I want to, though." He leaned against the counter. "What I did, using your name like that, I told myself it was a small thing. Borrowed credibility, not a real lie. It wasn't small. I know that now, mostly because a lawyer explained it to me in very small words." A faint, self-conscious smile. "I'm still paying it back. All of it. The funds and you in whatever way you'll let me. You don't owe me anything on that, Grant. What you owe is to the people who actually donated, thinking they were helping veterans." "I know. I meant it more generally." He paused. "For 20 years, you were the answer to every problem in this family, and I never once asked what that cost you until you stopped being available. That's on me too, not just Mom and Dad." "Thank you for saying that. I'm not going to pretend I've got it all figured out," he said, "but I'd like to actually earn back some trust. Slowly. If that's all right." "That's more than all right." The next morning, I had to return to Travis. Duty called, the way it always had. Before I left, my mother handed me 2 containers full of leftovers. "I made extra," she said. I smiled. "For me?" She shook her head. "For your airmen, the ones who have to stay on base." I looked at her for a long moment. "The ones who can't get home for the holiday." She nodded. "They're somebody's children too." Neither of us spoke for a second. Then I hugged her tightly, and when I pulled away, there were tears standing in her eyes. "I finally understand," she whispered. "I think we all do now," I said. "Some of us just took the scenic route getting there." Back at Travis, I carried the containers into the dining hall myself. Many of the same airmen I'd shared Thanksgiving with the year before were there, along with a new group experiencing their first holiday away from everything familiar. Master Sergeant Cruz lifted one of the lids and inhaled. "General, this smells incredible. My mother made it." She grinned. "Tell her she just became everybody's favorite mom on this base." "I will." As we served food together, I thought about how strange the last year had been and how necessary. I hadn't lost my family the way I'd feared I might that first quiet Thanksgiving alone in my office. I'd found a healthier way to actually belong to them. Love had come back into that house, not because anyone had forgotten what happened, but because everyone had finally accepted their share of responsibility for it. That, it turned out, was what made real forgiveness possible in the first place. Later that week, Lieutenant General Marcus Reyes, my wing's higher headquarters commander, stopped by my office on an unrelated visit and paused at the door on his way out. "I heard about the situation with your family, General Ashford," he said. "The fraud complaint, the Inspector General referral. That couldn't have been an easy call to make." "It wasn't, sir. For what it's worth, that's exactly the kind of judgment this Air Force needs more of at the flag level. Doing the right thing even when it costs you something personal." He nodded once, the way senior officers do when they mean something and don't intend to make a longer speech out of it. "Good work, General." "Thank you, sir." After he left, I sat alone in my office for a moment, looking out at the flight line the way I had that first difficult Thanksgiving. The runway lights were coming on against the early dusk, aircraft lined up in neat, disciplined rows, everything exactly where it was supposed to be. There's a particular kind of order to a flight line that you don't often find inside a family. And for most of my life, I had mistaken the order I could create at work for the order I was failing to create at home. People sometimes ask me, when I tell an abbreviated version of this story, whether refusing to pay for Thanksgiving that year was really about revenge. It wasn't. The point was never watching a holiday fall apart, or hearing angry voicemails, or even the uncomfortable business of reporting my own brother to an investigator. The real turning point came earlier and quieter than any of that. The moment I stopped believing that my value to my own family depended entirely on what I could provide them. The greatest act of self-respect I've ever practiced wasn't refusing to write a check. It was finally saying yes to a boundary I should have set 2 decades earlier. Boundaries didn't destroy my family in the end. They revealed exactly what needed to change, and once we were all willing to face that honestly, healing finally had room to actually grow. Today, our holidays are smaller, simpler, considerably less expensive, and somehow immeasurably richer because everyone brings something real to the table now instead of an expectation. Sometimes it's a casserole. Sometimes it's dessert, or an apron, or just someone's honest time and attention. But no one carries the whole family alone anymore. No one has to. I've spent my career serving this country with everything I had to give. It took me far too long to learn that honoring myself was just as important as honoring that uniform. If you're carrying a weight in your own family that was never really meant to be yours alone, I hope you'll remember this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't giving more. Sometimes it's quietly, respectfully saying no more. And if you do, you may discover, the way I finally did, that the people who genuinely love you will eventually learn to meet you exactly where you are.